field wall. Yeah, boy.
Yes, yes, Jackie hit that ball.
And when he swung his bat, the crowd went wild because he knocked that ball a solid mile. Yeah, boy.
Yes, yes, Jackie hit that ball. Satchel Paige is mellow, so is Campanella, Newcomb and Dobie too. But it's a natural fact, when Jackie comes to bat, the other team is through.
Did you see Jackie Robinson hit that ball? Did he hit it? Yes! And that ain't all. He's going home!
Yes, yes, Jackie's real gone.
Robinson hit that ball. Did he hit it? Yes! And that ain't all. He's going home.
Yes, yes, Jackie's real gone. 'Cause Jackie is a real gone now.
Robinson hit that ball. It went zooming across the left field wall. Yeah, boy.
Yes, yes, Jackie hit that ball.
And when he swung his bat, the crowd went wild because he knocked that ball.
You hated to see Jackie Robinson come up when the game was on the line because he could beat you so many ways. Certainly could beat you with his bat, but you were fearful of him beating you with his feet.
Bunt. Might be trouble. Might be trouble. They don't even throw it. Look, that doesn't even throw it. It's a bunt single.
He was so quick. Boom, he's in high gear, one stride. And geez, an aggressive guy. He took every inch he could get.
He was the greatest base runner I ever saw, the best at going from first to third, without a doubt, and could scare a pitcher to death when he was on third base.
And he literally danced.
Robinson dancing.
And he was in constant motion. And he captivated the fans, not to mention drove the opposing pitchers crazy.
Bello steps off. Robinson gave him a bluff run over there.
I can remember sitting on the bench and watching him, or being in the bullpen and watching Jackie, and just realize if I was a pitcher, how would I handle this?
When I played for the Dodgers, I used to wonder, how does he upset pitchers? I know other guys take leads and they steal, but pitchers would look and kept saying, well. Then I got traded to the Reds, and I had a pitch against Jackie, and I saw, you'd be looking on peripheral vision, you can see like a rabbit, he's hopping. He's hopping.
He'd run way up the line, and you'd think he was going to steal home, and he'd go back. And then when he'd run up and you thought he wasn't going, boom, he'd go.
Robbie's coming to the plate. The throw to Berra. He steals it.
Zacha's famous steal of home in the 1955 World Series was just one of the 20 thefts of home in his illustrious career.
And good afternoon, baseball fans, and we're glad to have you all here. Greetings from the heart of America in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm Raymond Doswell with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. We're very excited to have you all here today for this wonderful program. That clip is from the Breaking Barriers video by MLB Home Video on Jackie Robinson, was produced for the 50th anniversary of the integration of baseball. It's a video clip that I like to use when I do presentations on Jackie Robinson to show just how prolific an athlete he was. And he is someone who we have known throughout history and as someone as a great pioneer in baseball, but it's always exciting to actually see him play. And we're fortunate that we have these video documents to be able to remind us of how tenacious an athlete he was. And that is more of what we're going to learn about today in this special program in partnership with our friends at the Society of American Baseball Research. We're also thankful for our friends at the Pandemic Baseball Book Club. If you haven't heard of them, they are a community of writers and readers who are promoting baseball in the pandemic, if you will. So we want to encourage you to follow them, and there is their website at pbbclub.com and learn about the many authors and others who are producing books in this pandemic times. Things are getting better for all of us, and we're able to get out and do some more programming in person, but we're hopeful that you continue to learn about baseball while you're shut in or wherever you are. And we're thankful that you're taking time with us this afternoon during the lunch hour on the East Coast to come and learn about Jackie Robinson and our partnership with SABR, and we're very thankful for the Pandemic Baseball Book Club for supporting this opportunity. Also, I want to thank all our members and donors to the museum. You too can become a member as well as get information about the museum and all our activities that we sometimes showcase on Facebook and YouTube. Just go to www.nlbm.com to get on the membership list and mailing list and become part of the community. We'll have more about that later through the chat and information for how you can sign up to become a member. So we're very pleased to be partnering with the Society of American Baseball Research and their SABR publications. And today we're going to be talking about their latest book. They have several books in SABR publications, but this is one of the latest books that they have. It's called Perspectives on 42, and it is edited by Bill Nowlin, co-edited by Bill Nowlin, who will join us shortly. 52 essays on Robinson from 54 society contributors, authors, historians, and others, giving us perspectives on the great Jack Robinson. And it is available in paperback if you want to order it, but you can also order it as an ebook, which is what I was able to do. And you can download it that way and read it via your computer or devices. So that is available to you, and we'll have information on how you can order that directly as well. But we want to talk about it first, and we're very fortunate to have some friends here that can help us do that. Again, we're very pleased to welcome Bill Nowlin, who is the editor of this volume and many other volumes of books published by SABR. One of our great friends, Dr. Leslie Heaphy, from Kent State University, who is one of the leading scholars in Negro Leagues history. And among our new friends, historian and sports agent Burton Rocks is here to help lead our conversation about this wonderful book and this history. And we want to welcome them all to the program right now on screen. Hello, Burton. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Ray.
Good to have you all here. And we're excited. And Burton, I'm going to just go off screen for a minute. And again, folks, if you have questions, we want to make sure that we have time for you to put those questions in the chat, and we want to show those questions to our guest on screen as well, and for you to do that. And again, we'll be adding information about the book, how to order it, and information about the museum as well. So Burton, take it away.
Thanks, Ray. Bill, Leslie, an honor to be with you. Bill, take us through SABR publications overall, and what's the process for authors? Tell us about it.
SABR is a volunteer organization. We're all volunteers. There are about 6,000 members in SABR these days. Many are just fans of baseball. I've had people say, "You mean I could actually join SABR?" Yes, it's just fans of baseball who enjoy passionate conversation with other people who love the game. Some people take it further and are interested in writing history, biography, ways to look at baseball performance analytically, that type of thing. We have a whole range of people. We have maybe, I don't know, Leslie, you would know better, 35 or 40 different research committees that each look at different areas of baseball where people that have that specific interest are focus. We do have an active program that we started almost 10 years ago. In December 2011 was when we reactivated the publication program. And we've been putting out a lot of books on top of the usual journals that we put out 3 times a year, and have added 1 or 2 other journals as well. We're putting out 8 or 9 books a year, it seems like, these days. They're all free to SABR members for download purposes. That's one of the benefits of being in SABR. But we like to give serious researchers an audience, but we also like to encourage people who've never written before. Maybe they're students looking to build a resume, or just looking to write something, express some feelings about baseball. They might be recent retirees. I've heard from maybe 2 people in just the last month or so who said, "I just retired. Now I'd like to have a chance to write something about the sport that I love, baseball." So we try to encourage people to be first timers. We're all volunteers. We all had a first article that we once wrote. And I think that most of us are pretty good about encouraging other people, taking questions and answers. We've always got new books in the works. We've got a book coming out hopefully next month on the 1942 Kansas City Monarchs. It's at the design stage right now. We've got new projects that we're hoping to launch soon, looking further ahead to maybe 2023, even a book on Roberto Clemente that we're hoping will get approved by the editorial board soon, a book on a Negro Leagues team, the 1934 Philadelphia Stars. We're hoping to have both of those books come along. So if you might be interested in either one, make a note of it and get in touch with us. It's all for SABR members. It's a privilege of being a member of SABR to be able to write for these books. Raymond mentioned earlier this particular book on Jackie Robinson. I can talk more about that.
Yes, tell us how it all came together, this book, how everything came.
This book has 75 articles in it altogether. As the graphic indicated, there are 54 different members of SABR that contributed to that book. So we do try to we won't put out a book that just one person writes anymore. There's so many people that want to contribute, and so many ways that people can contribute. Some people are in the background as editors that help us get our facts straight and speak English like we know how, write English like we know how to speak it or something. But and we have a translator that translates some of our works into Spanish when we got a book on the Dominicans in Major League Baseball coming out, and that book will be in 2 editions. We had 54 different contributors to this book here. There are 34 game stories in the book, specific games that stood out in Jackie Robinson's career. He did this or he did that. It was, his first home run, that type of thing that we like to feature. There are another 40 articles on top of that, as well as biographies of Rachel Robinson and Jackie Robinson. It's kind of, the topics range far and wide. I could go through a list of them. Maybe I'll just touch on a few briefly. There's one about him being an athlete at UCLA. Another one that looks at his service in World War II as a cavalry officer, something people don't think about all that time. His time with the Kansas City Monarchs, his year with the Montreal Royals, his experiences in Havana during spring training and all, how he finished his career actually in Japan on a postseason tour. There's an analysis, I talked about analytics before, an analysis of his work as a second baseman, how he looked statistically. He was, in his day, the best at his position, both offensively and defensively, according to this analysis. I wrote an article, maybe we'll talk about later, about him stealing home, which we saw in the little bit on. It was fun for me to see Yogi Berra got so animated there about the steel being pulled off against him. His relationships with owners over the years, his relationship with the Republican Party. Leslie wrote about, and hopefully she'll talk some about his role with the civil rights movement. We had someone look at the way he's been depicted in children's literature, in young adult literature, on stage, on screen, and the work of the Jackie Robinson Foundation. And that's just some of the topics, but that's a good array of them there.
It's a fantastic book. I actually bought the hard copy. And Leslie, how did you select your topic?
Well, as a historian, my interest is always, I'm not a big analytics person. I just will say that right up front. And so I'm much more interested in other aspects. And so when the opportunity came up, I looked at the list of potential topics and thought, one of the things that has always interested me about Robinson is we look at him pretty much sort of during his athletic career, and not so much the things he did after. And so I was really interested in bringing that out and researching what he did as far as the civil rights movement, his involvement in politics, et cetera. Just what was he, to make him a more complete human being. He was more than just what happened on the baseball diamond or the football field and those kinds of things.
What I loved about the article was the idea of responsibility beyond the game. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was very clear from early on, and certainly by the time Robinson even was playing, that he recognized that because of the privilege that he had, and he talks about that literally as a privilege and the position that he had in society, that he felt a responsibility to use his voice and to continue to use that position of privilege because he felt like it was unfair to not do that. He talks about the idea that his privilege gave him a voice that others didn't have, that he needed to use in order to change the world, to change America. Because he said, until there's a day when everybody had the opportunity, at least, to strive for a position like he had and a voice, then that was his responsibility. And he took it, as I found, he took it very, very seriously. And he never backed down from an issue that he thought was important or a concern. He lent his name, he lent his voice, he lent his words, he lent his feet when he marched, all of those kinds of things to make sure that he could make a difference.
And Rachel Robinson, I'd love you to talk about her importance to Jackie, to the civil rights movement. I mean, they were a team together. Sharon said that to me, they were a team.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that you read, and there's a wonderful piece in the book by Ralph Carhart that really brings out Rachel's role. And it's very clear from the earliest days when they first met all the way through that Rachel was an important influence on Jackie. She was his rock. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but she was, all right. She was another cliche, you could say she was his port in the storm, right? That idea that he had to have somebody to go to that could listen to him, simply be there to calm him down, to be that influence. And whether it was in Montreal, whether it was when he was playing for the Monarchs, later for Brooklyn, when she went south with them to Cuba, when they bought their house in Connecticut, she was always that steadying influence. And even Ricky, when he was looking for the person to break the color barrier, he wanted somebody that that's one of the questions he asked Jackie. Do you have a steady girlfriend, right? Is this somebody that he was looking, because he recognized what Jackie was going to go through. And so, Rachel serves that role, but Rachel also in her own right needs to be recognized beyond that as simply, she's not just Jackie Robinson's wife, right? She's not just, plays that role. She herself, well-educated, works out in the field in nursing and others, and then goes on to certainly continue after Robinson dies to make sure that his story, his legacy was preserved, was protected. She made sure that some of the things that he wanted to do that never got to do are carried out. One of the biggest things, of course, is the creation of the Jackie Robinson Foundation, which was created in 1973 and continues to the present with the scholarships they give out, all of those. Rachel was the guiding hand in all of that. I also find fascinating the concerts that they started very early on to raise money for civil rights at their Connecticut home have continued on, and that was Rachel's role as well. I would also just point out something just a little bit different and odd for people to think about. Robinson's real first name, of course, is Jack. It's not Jackie. And everybody calls him that, and everybody did. Rachel certainly did not, because she always referred to him as Jack because that was his name. And it's an interesting thing to think about, given the topic that in a lot of the, particularly when you think about the notion of being the first Black to break the color barrier, et cetera, the notion of calling him Jackie is a little kid's name. And it continues. His plaque in the Hall of Fame says Jack Roosevelt Robinson, and Rachel called him that. And that, I think, is a recognition of the relationship that they had as well, in seeing him for who he was.
Bill, how did you select the topics that you particularly delved into?
Well, as one of the editors of the book, I had a slight advantage. I could pick anything I wanted to write about that I thought I might be okay at. I ended up writing an article on his stealing home, and so that was why it was fun for me to watch that bit that I hope everybody got to see at the beginning of the program here today. I mean, when he broke into the major leagues, he was 28 years old. These days, they start saying that when you hit 29 or 30, you've kind of reached your peak. And he was no young speedster. He was a speedster for sure. I mean, his brother was an Olympic athlete that competed in the 1936 Olympics, and he himself won I think he won some sprinting competitions too. But how often does somebody steal home these days? Not that often. I mean, it used to be more common than it is today, but maybe 7 or 8 times a year. I tried to look up some statistics recently, and I couldn't find any for recent years, but 4 or 5 years ago, that was about it. The chances of us being at a game or even watching a game on television and seeing live a steal of home as opposed to a replay of it later, they're pretty small. I think I've seen one, and I've been to hundreds and hundreds of games. He stole home 19 times in the regular season, and he stole home once in a World Series. That's just astonishing. He did it, 1948, he stole, his rookie year, he stole 3 bases and got caught once. He did get caught 12 times, but that's not necessarily all that bad, which I'll explain in a moment. It was hinted at in the video there. I detailed both the successful steals that he had and the times he got caught. He was a practitioner of disruptive base running. We saw that illustrated. He was hopping around, jumping around, distracting the pitcher. The opposition never knew what he was up to, and he was just trying to distract the pitcher any way he could. Apparently, Branch Rickey told him that early on. I found a quotation someplace where he said to him, we want you to essentially cause chaos on the base paths. You're going to get caught sometimes, but you're going to succeed most of the time. He stole 3 bases his first year. He stole 5 his second year. He stole 5 his third year. As he got older, he slowed down a little bit, but it was always a threat. There was one time in Montreal, the year before he debuted in the what we call the major leagues with the Dodgers. He was jumping around on third base so much that he discombobulated the pitcher into a balk, and so he got a free pass home. The umpire just waved him home, and he did it again in the same game, twice in one game. He was jumping around so much, the pitcher got distracted and balked, and so he got 2 free runs out of it, in effect. He was a smart base runner, too. There was a time where he intentionally got hit by a batted ball. If you got hit by a batted ball, it's an out. Well, he was on second base, I believe it was. The bases were loaded, and there was 1 out. And Rory Campanella hit a ground ball that was going to go for a double play. So he interrupted the double play by intentionally getting hit by the ball. 1 out. Campanella gets on first base. Base is still loaded. I mean, that's really smart. The instinct is to get out of the way. It was clear that he didn't that he intended to get hit. It wasn't like he just happened to get hit and we wrote a story about it later. But it just, I mean, unbelievable efforts in that regard. I enjoyed writing that. It gave me there's 32 times that I'd look up games, research the moment in the game, and read a paragraph about each one.
Hours of research that it took to do all that.
Yeah, but I enjoy that kind of thing. A lot of people at SABR do it. Take a game, pick it apart, and try to see what was happening, and then it's satisfying if you can put together a story out of it.
The Grand Slams. You also wrote about that. Take us through that article.
Did I write one about Grand Slams? I mean, I don't know.
I thought it was interesting about the Grand Slam.
Get the book here.
And I thought what was interesting about the stolen bases was he stole at every level of ball. UCLA, Montreal, and Brooklyn.
There are a couple of games that he stole second, third, and home, all in the same game. It's like hitting for the cycle or something. I don't remember in particular writing about Grand Slams. I'm sorry.
You wrote about the Grand Slam, his walk-off that he won? Grand Slam?
Well, you tell the story. You might remember.
And I was just looking at the table of contents, Bill.
It was one of the game stories?
Yeah. You wrote about Robinson's first Grand Slam, wins in a walk-off.
Well, that sounds good. I don't remember it right now. Sorry. But it's in the book.
It is. It is.
So I want to ask both of you, what's the most exciting fact, anecdote that unexpectedly came to you through your research, through putting this whole book together? What's the most exciting part?
I mean, Leslie, while you're thinking, I just enjoyed working with all these people. As I mentioned, 53 other people and myself helping put this book together. And people have so many different perspectives. The story that I enjoyed reading the most, in a way, just because it was a bit of a revelation, was written by a member named Brian Steverson. It's called There But for the Grace of God. And it was a story about Robinson. This is in 1941, 6 years before he joined the Dodgers. He was had dropped out of school. Don't do that, kids. But he went to Hawaii, and he was playing semi-pro football there late into the year, but he was kind of homesick. So he booked a couple tickets, one to leave on December 5th, 1941, and he had another one, maybe a backup one in case he changed his mind, for January 2nd. Well, he took the one on December 5th. He shipped out from Honolulu. The ship went to San Francisco, and then he was going to make his way back to Los Angeles. He got on board that boat on December 5th, and as many people may remember, if you think about December 1941, within 48 hours, there was an attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th. I don't know what time of day his boat left, but it was within 48 hours. There were 2,400 people killed in that attack, civilians and military personnel. He got out, and he was on. I mean, he got the news before they docked in San Francisco. If he had not taken that boat, who knows? He might have been one of those hundreds of people that lost their lives.
Leslie, you're a Mets fan. Tell me about the impact. I know Met players such as Ed Charles have viewed Jackie Robinson as a hero to them. Just tell me about your own baseball experiences and the excitement of doing this type of research.
Well, first, being a Mets fan, certainly Ed Charles is indicative of many who see Robinson as their hero. But Ed Charles in particular, the story with him takes you all the way back to Happy Chandler and the comments made during World War II about the idea that, and we all have to think about this. This is that as a black man, they could go and they could fight and they could die, right? But they couldn't play a simple game together. And the idea that was not possible without Jackie. And so for Ed Charles and others, that idea that what Jack Robinson did was not just to play a baseball game, but he changed the way we look at society and gave opportunities where opportunities hadn't been. And that is the kind of thing that makes the research that we do and the research that I do much more than just about a baseball. Bill was talking about you write a story and you try to you read about a game and then you try to create a story. You think about what's happening. It's more than just the hit itself. It's more than just, right. And in Robinson's case, we really see that it was more than that. And he himself probably had, he certainly had some idea, but I think he would be amazed today to see the impact that he has continued to have. The fact that his number has been retired by every baseball team, right? And every kid wants to wear that number. The fact that Mariano Rivera was the last person to get to wear that number. The fact that, his legacy has continued. And the fact that we're talking about him today like this is what's really exciting. And so, Ed Charles is just one of many who certainly has benefited from and sees, in the book itself, Larry Lester wrote that piece about Robinson, getting to see Robinson, his hero. As a kid, he never got to see him play, but he got to go see him, and he got his father, who was a Democrat, to take him to see this at a Republican convention because Robinson was his hero. I mean, those are the kinds of things that are really bring these people to life and make you realize that even though we might look at baseball as a game, it's much more than that. And Robinson's story certainly brings that out. And that's what I find exciting when we do this kind of research.
You do wish that he could come back, and maybe he is looking at us somehow, but I thought it was fun when they started doing the Jackie Robinson Day thing with every player wearing 42 on the uniform. I remember saying to my son, who was much younger at the time, wait, look, everybody's wearing, they look like this. A couple guys, wait, there's another guy wearing 42. And that led into a little conversation about what it was all about.
In case there are kids watching, kids always find inspiration in writing. What has given each of you your inspiration? To do research, to do this, obviously love of the game, but just to inspire the next generation.
Well, for me, it's always been important to just personally learn about history. And then it's never been something, regardless of what I've been writing about, that I've wanted to not share. Because if you find something out, it doesn't seem, it's like, oh man, this is really cool. I tell my students all the time, when you find something out that's really interesting and you want to be able to share it, right? And you don't want to keep it to yourself, because what's the point of that? And so but I also find that writing is a way to help people understand maybe things that normally we don't necessarily examine, we don't think about as much as we should, to take that opportunity to really delve into something and begin to understand it. But also writing gives you a chance to, to make an impact, to make a difference, to give people a chance to see something and understand something that they might not otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, just for fun, I went to see the Red Sox open the 2008 season in Tokyo against the Oakland Athletics in 2008, as I went to see them play the Yankees in 2019 in London. But I just did it for fun, although I did write a story about it for Red Sox Magazine, the 2008 thing. But now we have a SABR book coming out in another year or two about the U.S. tours of Japan. So in the last week, I've enjoyed going back and looking at my photographs, but also seriously researching what people wrote in the Japan Times and other publications about the attempt to expand to internationalize baseball, going back into earlier times. Clemente, there's a Clemente connection there too, because the Roberto Clemente series in Puerto Rico first began in 1976. Just a few years after his death. Recently, I decided to start looking more into umpires. And because of writing about stuff, I decided, okay, I'm going to interview a bunch of umpires. We had a SABR book that came out about 4 or 5 years ago called the SABR Book of Umpires and Umpiring. But then I took it a step further and just kept going. And it gives me an excuse. Now I get to go back and talk to umpires, not this year. The protocols will lighten up soon, but I mean, last year and this year, I just sort of waved to them from 20 feet away as they come into the park. But I interviewed 72 major league umpires and asking them about their backgrounds, why they got into umpiring, what they do, the conditions of work, et cetera, et cetera. And I learned an awful lot about the game myself, selfishly. It's fun. I mean, I get to talk to these people that are kind of anonymous behind the scenes people. I talk to the players too sometimes, but I enjoy telling the story, some of the stories behind the stories.
The great part about the book is it keeps on giving. It just keeps the history of the era and framing it alive. How do you both feel as historians and writers about the idea of living, breathing history?
Leslie's the full-time historian.
I mean, I was just going to say that's what I do all the time. And to me, it's the greatest thing you ever get to do, because it gives you the chance to bring all of these pieces to life, and it means that, because for me, and I think you put it interestingly when you asked the question, Burton, it's about living and breathing, that you're taking history out of the, out of the dustbin, so to speak. I mean, that's that cliche phrase, right? And you bring it to life. So we find out that, we knew this much about Robinson, and now we know that he was a basketball coach in 1944 and 1945, and that winters. Who knew that, right? And what that opportunity was like. I mean, Bill just told the story about Robinson could have been at Pearl Harbor, and that one simple, and so that opportunity allows you to then talk about Pearl Harbor and what happened, which brings that history to life. I always tell my students that history is not about just numbers and statistics, right? It's about the people. The statistics in baseball, those are great. They're wonderful and they're important and they help, but you don't stop there, right? And so in every story that's in here about every game that they talk about the walk-off home run in 1940, right? It doesn't matter where those are just the beginning of the story, and you bring it to life. And then you bring the people to life, and suddenly we have a connection that we didn't have before. Because how do you connect to just numbers, or to just a story, just a flat story in a book? You have to bring it to life. You have to make these people real, and then we can connect. And I think that's what makes history so fascinating and so interesting. So that every time you find that new, even if the nugget is this big, right? It's the tiniest little thing. It's very cool. It adds to the picture. And suddenly you've got something to talk about too.
I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the first battle of the American Revolution took place. And all during high school, I worked as a historic guide on the Lexington Battle Green. I didn't get paid. I just worked for tips. But I would approach people and tell them the story of if they were willing to listen, tell them the story of the Battle of Lexington and how it all began. It was just great fun trying to convey information to people. And there are lessons along the way. I mean, and I was 14 years old. I think my father and mother drove me and my two younger sisters to Washington. This is before the interstate highway system was built in the middle 50s. And it was really, really hot in rural Maryland at some point there, and we were desperate for something to drink or eat or something. So we finally saw a roadhouse up ahead on the left, and all cheered in the car. And then we pulled up, got to the door, and there was a little sign by the front door that said "Whites Only." My father said, "Back in the car." And there was a great lesson that came out of that I will never forget. 20 minutes down the road, we found another place, and so gave them our patronage. There are stories, events that we have lived in our lives that we are maybe able to pass on, or vicariously you try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I mean, I can't imagine everything that Jackie Robinson went through. We can learn what we can about it.
History is almost like a track and field event, the relay race, passing that baton to the next generation. And I think that's the exciting part. Leslie, your students must be excited with the energy and everything. So I think it's great for them.
I like your analogy, because that is exactly what we do. And I think going back to a question you'd asked earlier about sort of Jackie's responsibility, right? That's sort of that same idea. He had a responsibility and he felt like he had to do something. And it goes to if you don't, then it gets lost, right? And So when we learn, we need to share it, we need to pass it on, but we also need to make sure that we do it in the right fashion and in the right ways, and correct things that are misrepresented. And so for people who like that aspect, there's, again, thinking about this book, there's a couple of stories in there where we challenge myths and stories that have been told about Robinson over and over, like the St. Louis Cardinals strike, and the idea that is that a true story or not? Well, I'm not going to give it away. You can read the story, but that's part of it as well, is if you don't then things just get repeated and repeated, and nobody ever challenges those and goes and says, well, wait a second, what really happened and what was the story behind that? Now, Bill's comment, there's always more to the story. And I tell my students all the time, right? It's never just this one-sided or just this one, it's too simple. So let's go look and dig deeper and find out what was really going on.
I saw a question pop up on the screen asking about Jackie Robinson's time in the Negro Leagues. There is a very specific chapter that Bob Lemoyne wrote called Jackie Robinson in 1945 from Boston Tryout, in quotation marks, one of the embarrassing moments of Red Sox history. I'm a Red Sox fan, to a Negro Leagues star. And then we have another chapter that talks about his 1946 with Montreal. We have different segments, but there is a full chapter devoted to his year with Kansas City in 1945.
Right.
I thought it was interesting. Rachel said that the Montreal family welcomed them with open arms. That was really interesting. That was what was going on in Montreal. Yet here it was totally different.
Well, and that was part of the reason that Ricky chose to send Robinson to the Royals to start with, because he knew. And again, there's a good example of, you start with the baseball and you learn a larger lesson about history, the difference between what was happening in the United States and what was happening in Canada, and the fact that Robinson and Wendell Smith and Sam Lacey, the reporters, could all go to Canada and experience a very different lifestyle than they experienced in the northern part of the United States, and then from the southern part of the United States. And so you open up that lesson when you talk about what Robinson was able to do, and the fact that Rachel was able to sit in the stands with the others and not experience the same kinds of things that not only Jackie experienced, but she experienced in the stands in the United States.
And years later, things didn't necessarily change. I wrote Pumpsie Green's biography for SABR. We have a series of biographies, maybe 8 or 9, 10-page player biographies. And when he was with spring training with the Red Sox in Scottsdale, Arizona, he couldn't stay at the same hotel that the rest of the team did. And this was the late 1950s.
Yeah. Well, and speaking, I mean, when Robinson and what was it, Campanella and Partlow, and they all went to Cuba and to Havana and couldn't stay in the same hotel that the rest of the team was staying at. And Smith and Lacey talk about how awful that hotel was that they ended up having to stay at. And Robinson couldn't do anything about it because he hadn't yet passed that first season that Ricky had gotten him to agree he wasn't going to cause any trouble. He wasn't going to respond back to people, and he wasn't going to make any waves. And so,
even getting to spring training bumped from flights, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I'm looking for other questions. Well, what I always found interesting was that when Rachel said that they not only were a team, they were she was not going to let the outside world come into their house and bring all that hurt inside. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, that goes back to your question earlier about Rachel's role in Robinson's life, and the idea that Rachel knew that was necessary, not only for him, but also for their family and for their relationship, because of just how awful some of there's a piece in this book about the Philadelphia Phillies, who were clearly the worst of the worst that Jackie experienced, and the problems with Ben Chapman and all of the language. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of what Rachel was talking about, because when you look at the records, for example, that exist today at the Library of Congress, they have pages upon hundreds of letters and things that were written to Robinson, some of which were very fine and very nice, but a huge selection of them, they go so far as talking about hoping that he dies, and that they wanted him killed, and just think about the toll that would take if you never had an escape from it. And we do know it took a toll on Jackie. Jackie's health was deteriorated over the years, and you have to believe that the treatment that he received and the fact that he had to bottle up and not respond and couldn't respond the way he wanted to the many things that he heard, just had to be really hard on him. And so, we know he developed diabetes, all of those kinds of things that brought about, he died at 53. The toll that took. And so to think about it, how much worse might it have been if Rachel hadn't provided that escape and that opportunity to step away from it for a little bit.
Yeah, this was an athlete who died at age 53 too. He wasn't someone that had come from a health challenged background in that regard. It impresses me that the kind of the team that they had, both husband and wife, but also Branch Rickey, the care that he took looking into that. You maybe can approach him with a little bit of skepticism, but every time I read stuff about him, he seemed like he was really right there. He knew what he was doing. He knew why he was doing it, and in ways that Leslie indicated beforehand, he kind of he made his selection and counseled and prepared them to be able to weather it. I remember reading stories about him shouting racial epithets at Robinson in his office just to try to get a rise out of him, to then tell him that's the kind of stuff you're going to hear.
Yes, yeah. Well, Rickey, to your point, Rickey took this. I mean, Rickey recognized you can question Rickey's motives, all those kind of things, as people have, rightly so. I mean, these are right, but he also knew that if this was going to work, it had to be done correctly. It had to be done seriously. Otherwise, you could make this effort and the door would close if this didn't work. And so he took the responsibility very seriously of coming up with the right person. And there's a good example of question you asked earlier, Burton, about, bringing, it wasn't just about finding the right ball player. Jackie had all the skills. We see it, he's an athlete in every sense of the word, and you saw it in the clip, but he was also looking for the right person. And he had to have the right skill sets in other areas and the right support system in order to make this work. And so I think that's why I like the title of this book, The Perspectives on 42. It draws it out to and I think that was draws it out to a much bigger idea to think about how important and how easily it could have failed. I mean, and that's where Rickey played, and Ford Frick. There's a story in the book about Ford Frick and the role that he plays as well, because he had to approve every player, and he could have also said no. And so along every step, there were opportunities. If you use the Steverson story that you told earlier, Bill, right? Each one of these, if something different had changed, it all could have been very, very different.
I mean, he was the right person. He was also a tremendous athlete.
Oh yeah,
he was the first. His was the first year that there was a Rookie of the Year. He was the Rookie of the Year for Major League Baseball, not the American League, not the National League. He was Rookie of the Year. That was the first year they did that. As I mentioned before, he started at age 28, but he was a 6-time All-Star.
Well, and to your point about him being an athlete, in this book, baseball was not his best sport, and yet look what he did. I mean, he was a football player, he was a basketball player, he was a track and field runner. He probably would have gone to the 1940 Olympics if the 1940 Olympics had been held. And so that in itself puts all of this in a bit of a larger perspective as well. I saw the comment that was made about Robinson's daughter, the school program, and it is very cool. And so Bill had mentioned earlier, there's a piece in here about the young adult literature and things. Of course, Sharon Robinson has written a number of books on various aspects of her father's life that have been well used in schools and things like that. And so, in fact, one of them, Jackie Robinson Promises to Keep, has a workbook that goes with it and everything that can be used in the schools.
Yeah, the children's books are amazing, and the amount of literature is absolutely just inspiring. That's one of the greatest. The impact that his life has had on others, it's just inspiring. Any closing thoughts, Leslie, Bill?
It's great to have the opportunity to talk about this book, and I'm grateful for the chance to work with so many different members of SABR that contributed things that many of us didn't know as much about.
And I would say the same. I enjoyed getting the opportunity to work on the piece I did, but more importantly, I enjoyed reading all of the other pieces in the book. A lot of them I knew, but there were a lot that I knew just as much. And for me, again, this is a good example of that opportunity to, particularly with Robinson, to just make him come alive and see him as more than just the incredible ball player that he was, but there was much more to his life and his story. And this kind of book helps us. And so I just appreciate both the opportunity to write and the opportunity that we've gotten today to talk about it as well.
It's a fantastic read, and it will inspire everyone from every generation.
Joining a body of work that many other people have done as well.
All right, guys. Thank you all for this wonderful discussion. Burton, we want to thank you especially for leading it. Again, Burton is a sports agent and historian. You can look for among his books. There's 7 books that he has co-authored. His website is clrockscorp.com. That's clrockscorp.com. I can show that on the screen if you want to learn more about him, and especially his very entertaining and intelligent father, who will be other programming that you may see about him and his work with Paul DeYoung especially, but Burton is out there as well. And a special thanks to Bill and Leslie for contributing today to the Pandemic Book Club, and to SABR, of course, for this partnership. This is the first of many that we'll be able to explore many different books that SABR is putting out related to Negro Leagues history and baseball history. So look for announcements about future programming with SABR. There is another program that's coming up for the museum, and I want to tell you about it. It is our baseball book notes series. We're fortunate to have Larry Ty. Now, this book on Satchel Paige came out actually in 2009. So it's been 12 years, and we had him here before. But Larry's coming to town to do research on other work, and said, I would love to come back to the museum. And they're still selling this book. So Larry's going to be here and in person, our first in-person education program in about a year and a half. So, but we will also broadcast this via Facebook and YouTube as well. But if you are in town and you want to meet Larry and get a signed book after the discussion, you are welcome to do so. So we'll do that same time, 11 a.m. This is Tuesday, June 15th. Again, our first in-person education program in a long time. But we're very thankful for our guests here today. Very thankful to the members and donors of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum for making this happen. Please continue to look for our programs and support the museum through donations and memberships. That is the way that we're able to produce this programming for you. And it will be recorded for Facebook and YouTube as well. If any of your friends missed it during the lunch hour here, you can share it with them and they can watch it actually almost immediately after we're done. It'll be archived on YouTube. So thank you all. Thanks to our guests, Burton, Bill, Leslie. We hope that you all have a great day. Stay safe, and we will see you soon.